Back to Australia now, and the chair of the Royal Commission into Child Abuse, Justice Peter McClellan, has questioned convicted pedophile priest Gerald Ridsdale about whether or not his evidence has been influenced prior to this week's hearings in Ballarat. Ridsdale, who's serving a lengthy jail term for his abuse of hundreds of children over decades, failed to recall key facts for a second day in the row. The Commission has established Ridsdale's immediate superiors in the Catholic Church in Victoria were aware of his crimes since at least 1982, but left him in positions where he was able to abuse children, and they failed to report the abuse to police. Many of Ridsdale's victims have been watching him give evidence, and they say it's been a harrowing experience. Hamish Fitzsimmons has been in Ballarat for Lateline.
Answer this for me. You spoke with me in a private hearing some weeks ago, didn't you?
Yes, in Ararat, when we had the private closed hearing.
Had you spoken to anyone about the evidence you might give in that hearing before you came to that private hearing?
No, I've spoken to no one about it. I was told not to.
Since that private hearing, have you spoken to anyone about the evidence you might give in this public hearing?
No. Again, I was told not to say anything about it.
Have you had any phone calls with anyone when you might have discussed the evidence?
No.
Why do you think Peter McClellan was so angry at Gerald Ridsdale this morning?
Well, look, I think Justice McClellan, like everybody else in the room, is very frustrated with the really patchy recall, the loss of memory, if you like, the blackout from the past versus the present.
Why do you think Gerald Ridsdale isn't being as accurate as Peter McClellan wants him to be?
Well, look, it's hard to sort of trust somebody with a history like his that they're ever going to tell you the truth.
Why do you think Gerald Ridsdale isn't telling the truth? What does he have left to lose?
I've got no idea, but at the end of the day, a person that's had such a long history of abusing children, and as he has said, cooking up excuses to keep away from the police, to keep away from the authorities, to always deceive, to always con, is ingrained.
There can be no doubt about that. You both knew you were talking about you engaging in criminal activity.
Yes, Your Honour, yes.
Now, did anyone, either Bishop Malcairns or anyone else in the church, ever indicate to you that they were going to go and tell the police about what you'd been doing?
No, I don't think so.
What about when you were in Sydney? Did anyone talk to you about your criminal activity in Sydney?
No, I can't remember, Your Honour, anyone ever doing that.
You can't remember anyone ever talking to you about it?
No.
The thought that was going through my mind today is that all it takes for evil to flourish is for good men to do nothing. Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there who know, whether it be housekeepers, gardeners, other priests. It's time for these people to stand up and say what they know. Don't let it go on any further.
It was really good to see the screen go blank. It was really good to see him disappear, to see the lies stop, to see the cover-up stop, to hear just his rubbish, his absolute lying and refusing to take responsibility for such terrible crimes.
David Ridsdale, what effect is seeing this testimony from Gerald Ridsdale having on yourself and all the other victims who are seeing it?
I've actually found it harder than giving evidence myself, and the impact is on the entire community. Unfortunately, one of the victims last night had an extremely rough time, and we almost had another suicide in Ballarat because of this. And of course those effects are much further afield than just the immediate victims. It's secondary, and it's the entire community, you know.
Now today, the man who is your uncle and the man who abused you was taken to task quite heavily by the Commissioner for, one, not perhaps telling the Commissioner what he said in a private hearing, and two, talking about the cover-ups that went on, saying that he knew there was criminal acts, but there was no step taken to report these criminal acts to the police. What do you make of that?
The reality is we now know the church knew what he was up to before I was born, so it's another level of abuse. It's simple as that. You know, what he did is the actions of a man who was allowed to fester. What they did is abhorrent. They try to make excuses for themselves that it was a different time, but it's never been a good time to allow predators to prey on children.